Jai Guru, everybody.
Jai Guru, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Awake Minute by Minute podcast. We're on episode number 51. So looking at minute number 51. And with us today, we are joined by a friend and fellow devotee, Ben. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here.
Jai Guru. Yes, thanks for joining us. And you may notice, if anybody's watching this, and any keen listeners, Priyank is with us today. But just a note, Priyank is busy himself supporting another guru, Sadhguru, on a mission to save the soil. So he's very busy with those responsibilities. And really, Ben, we wanted to come to you for a bit of an introduction. We know each other through London and the London SRF Centre. Maybe you can introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, things like that.
Okay, so I'm Ben. I've been a devotee on the path for 20 years, amazingly. I serve at the London Centre regularly, lead services, play the harmonium and various other things that come my way. And it's been a life changer, and it's kind of like central to everything.
Yeah.
I don't know what else you want to know.
Chris and I both met Ben at the London Centre. What I never asked Ben, and I'm curious about, is how did you actually find out about Guruji? How did you get on the path?
Right, so I was 25, 26, somewhere around there, and I'd been traveling around the world, finished university, come into a bit of money, got a round the world ticket, and I'd been in Africa and Australia, Southeast Asia, and I'd always wanted to go to India. I had meditated a little bit with another path, but it was very spasmodic. But I'd read a lot of books. Didn't know I was seeking, but I obviously was. So I got to India. I hadn't had a day's illness for the best part of 9 months. Within 2 days, got dysentery. Ended up on a drip in a hospital in Delhi. And I had some friends actually from London who I was just meeting there. So they looked after me initially, and then they went off, and I said, just tell me where you've gone. If I come out of this alive, I'll come and join you. And I got a message that they'd gone up to Rishikesh. So once I'd recovered or was allowed out, I was very weak, and I saw very thin, and I took the rather daunting journey up to Rishikesh, and they were in an ashram just outside Rishikesh, not SRF related. And it was such a relief to go to this ashram. It was beautiful, and there were the gardens down to leading to the Ganges, and it was a wonderful place to recuperate. And there was a Canadian guy there who had some books, and one of them was Autobiography of a Yogi. So I said, oh, that looks interesting. So I read it by the Ganges, and just was like, what is this? This is amazing. I mean, I can't describe the experience of it. It's almost like a dream to me now, that period of recuperating and being in this amazing place. And it wasn't my copy, and I didn't compute I could do anything with it. It was just this amazing thing that I knew had changed me. And I won't go into it, I had some other experiences there which were very profound. And then one day I decided it's time to go home. I need to get on with my life and like work out what I'm going to do with my life. So I came back to England, and then had the most difficult year I've ever had. I lost my dad. Lots of things happened, and I was really lost. And then this sounds strange, but 9/11 happened. 9/11, 2001. I remember watching this thing unfold on the TV and thinking, right, this is it. And a few days before, I'd had this song going around my head, which is from the musical West Side Story, which was something's coming, I don't know what it is, but it is gonna be great. And I was saying to people, this song's going around my head, something's gonna happen. And they all looked at me as though I was a bit crazy. And anyway, 9/11 happened. And I thought, I need to do something here. And everybody was talking about Nostradamus at the time, that he predicted it, right? And I've been quite interested in this in the past. So I thought, I'm going to buy a book to kind of research this. So I went into the Charing Cross Road where all the bookshops are, looking for this book of Nostradamus. They'd all sold out. And the first place I went to, the first book I saw was the Autobiography of a Yogi. And I thought, I've read that. And I moved on, but I knew at the time, I'm going to go back to that book. I'm going to buy it. There was still a bit of resistance in me. And I did. I went back and bought it and then reread it. And it was like, yeah, right, this is it. And so the following week, or within a couple of weeks, I went to the London Centre for the first time. And that was it. You know, that's where it all kind of began.
Wow.
Thanks for, sorry.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. This is such a nice story. Like where Guru places us sometimes. Like when you said you were sitting by the Ganges reading the Autobiography of a Yogi, I mean that sounds like a pretty special experience. Like I grew up with SRF, so in some way I always envy people when they have those kind of ways of how to, like I don't know, somebody goes to a library and the book falls on their head or something like that, you know. It sounds like you had a special experience. Special experience as well. It reminds me a bit of Steve Jobs. Like he said he went to India, he had food poisoning, some family there helped him back to health, and in their house he found the Autobiography of a Yogi and read it there. So it's interesting. Chris?
Yes, thanks for sharing that, Ben. Really, really nice. And there's moments where we have guests on the show and they feel it's serendipitous that they're on the show because of the particular minute in the documentary. And before we started recording, you said that maybe you felt the same, that there are things in this minute that we'll discuss and talk about that it seemed quite coincidental and serendipitous, that it had a unique spot in your heart and your relation to Guruji. So I just wanted to highlight that because we hear that so often, don't we, Mike? When people come on the show, like, oh, you know, this is really meaningful, this part of the minute to me because of X, Y, Z. So yeah, really nice to hear your story there and share. I'm sure the listeners and viewers will see the full circle of why it's relevant to you later on in the minute. But I wanted to ask about the watching the documentary. When was the first time you watched it, and what was your impressions?
I watched it when it first came out. I knew I'd been to the convocation where they were actually filming it, so I knew it was happening, and I'd heard all these stories about it, and there was this great expectation. And I watched it when it first came out. I haven't actually watched it that many times, I have to admit. And it was really nice watching it again today. I guess my first experience was, because I've been on the path quite a long time, was I know you had been talking about the Brother Dhirananda section recently. I think for a lot of us that was quite, you know, I didn't know anything about that. And the first time I saw that was very hard to watch. There was a bit of me that didn't want, you know, didn't want to know that part of Master because it really hurt. That betrayal really hurts. And I think maybe there was a reason sort of earlier on that wasn't sort of brought out in a big way, not to distract from, I don't know, but yeah, it's a very beautifully done film. It's very beautifully done. Yeah.
It is an interesting subject. We have talked about it before. We don't have to dwell on it too long, but we have talked about the documentary and how it was put together, what material was put in, and you know, we know that there was a lot of material even left out. So it's a kind of impossible task, but we, you know, theatrically or, you know, typical kind of movie or documentary setups, so it usually kind of follows a bit of a rhythm, right? You know, all go at the beginning and then a bit of a dip and maybe a uplifting part at the end. Less so documentaries, more movies, but there has to be some truth in this somewhere as to what Yogananda experienced. And I, for one, similar to you, Ben, hadn't really known a lot about Yogananda's challenges in his path to establish the SRF in the Western Hemisphere. So I was really grateful, and we've had many people on the show that say they can relate even more to Yogananda and appreciate even more what he did and had to go through, because it might all seem like almost a seamless path, but really, you know, it was fraught with challenges. So we have discussed this before, and we've kind of, you know, went back and forth what we'd want to see, and what, you know, could we do another documentary, and, you know, push them. Yeah, all food for thought. Mike.
Yeah, it's like you said, Chris, we talked about this many times. I remember when we had Varun Soni on the podcast, he said that they said when you have a movie, you always have to have like the part where you have a villain or where you have something dramatic happens, and then later on you have a conclusion. And they had a hard time in the beginning finding that, and that the section with the when the press wrote a lot of negative things, and then also the split with Dhirananda, this was what they ultimately chose. And I feel like it fits really well. And I was also the same, like I didn't know much about the difficulties Guruji had in his life. I mostly had my information about him from the autobiography of a yogi, and but I feel like it's good that those kind of things are out and more talked about. Like I don't think necessarily we need to dwell on them, but it's good to know that he had difficulties like that, and it humanizes him to us as well, right? And then it shows us how he overcame those challenges as well.
Yes.
There's the drama of life. There's the drama of life. Maybe that's what we're going to talk about today anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The external, you know, the stuff we all go through. It's a bit like my dysentery, that story and all of that out to sight. And then there's the inner side. And I guess that we relate to the guru as a very personal, you know, it's the most personal experience you have. And then his outer story as well. And both are true of, you know, of our lives as well. There's the external, my name and my role in life this time round. And then there's also that inner, I don't know, you know, that inner journey that goes along. And maybe that's one of the
yeah, it's the theme of the minute, really. And if we want to delve into this minute, we can always come full circle and talk about this again, Ben. But this minute really is characterized by two parts. There's the first of the continuation, really, of the chaotic and tumultuous time that, as we mentioned, with Dhirananda leaving and taking many students with him, suing Yogananda, as we talked about, ultimately leaving the Swami order, marrying one of the students. It was clearly quite a challenging time for Guruji. The second part of this minute is really returning, as you mentioned there, Ben, or alluded to, returning to the inner state of peace. So we see Brother Vishwananda on a pilgrimage to Babaji's cave. So we'll talk about both of those things in more detail. Mike, do you want to jump in?
To get us kicked off with the Mexico part, do we want to read the section from Phil Goldberg? Like, you may want to read the first paragraph and I'll read the second one. Sure.
Go. This is sure. I'll read the first one. Up to divine grace. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So Phil Goldberg, we've had as a guest on the show before. You know, please do check him out. Anybody listening and hasn't heard that, excellent researcher. He in his book Life of Yogananda talks about this time in Mexico, and he says, by Yogananda's own account, he was bereft over losing his best friend. Close disciples used terms like heartbreak, discouraged, and distraught in describing the impact of the incident on their guru. Sorry, this is I'm probably speaking out of context now, aren't I, Mike? I'm tripping over my words because No, this is about Dhirananda. Sorry, I was thinking about the next topic. Forgive me. Let me continue. He felt betrayed by that in private correspondence. He sometimes called Dhirananda a Judas. Add to those feelings the exhausting schedule and the ongoing struggle to keep his organization afloat. And it is no wonder that a man who always longed for Himalayan solitude would want to get away. He was able to do so thanks to the family of Oscar Sanger, a famed baritone and voice teacher who had become Yogananda's student and friend. Sanger died shortly after Yogananda's confirmation with Dhirananda. Yogananda conducted the funeral service, and afterward, the Sanger family invited him to their home on Lake Chapala in Mexico. So this must have seemed like an act of divine grace, Phil Goldberg says. So yeah, really sets some tone and detail for this minute that we can look into a little bit. The pictures in the minute, we see a couple of things really. A really nice video of Yogananda sitting on top of a pyramid in Mexico. And then we see a picture of Yogananda looking quite stern, quite serious. And the backdrop, there's a body of water. And whenever I was reading this quote from Phil Goldberg's book, Lake Chapala, so that picture in the documentary, I'm guessing that is then Lake Chapala, with the Sanger's family home. I'm guessing that is. Mike, are you aware of this?
Yeah, it is. And I was always wondering, like, I'm just putting two and two together right now, but there's this famous picture of Yogananda on a boat, right? The one that I have here behind me as well. I'm not sure we can see it very well, but it's also supposedly in Lake Chapala, which is apparently very beautiful. Like in a different part, I think in the autobiography of a yogi somewhere, Guruji mentions the most beautiful places he had seen in the world, and he mentions the English lakes, and he mentions the Himalayas, and he also mentions the area around Guadalajara in Mexico, which is where this is.
Yeah, I didn't know where that picture was from with Yogananda on the boat. Now I always wondered, like, did he have a history of sailing? Because if that's like into the sea, it's so ridiculously brave. So we have these pictures, and we have all this coming together. Yogananda going to Mexico, and this is all, as I mentioned about tone. This is all captured with the music that continues from the previous minutes. And Ben, I know you're a musician. Maybe you can appreciate this. And Mike, I know I'm probably the only non-musician in the group. Priyank plays as well. But whenever I was listening to the music in this minute, it was really impactful to me. It was very sorrowful. And it really felt like heartache. When I was making some notes for this minute, I actually wrote heartache and sorrow. So it was interesting that Phil Goldberg said that disciples were using term about heartbreak for Yogananda at the time, because that really is what comes across with the music in this minute that continues from the prior minutes. And this is really meant to represent the emotions that Paramahansa Yogananda is experiencing at this time. But I did want to touch here on Oscar Sanger. This is somebody that I don't believe we talked about before, right? And this was a friend of Yogananda's. Maybe Priyank, could you tell us a little bit more about this? Oh, sorry, Priyank, Mike. Forgive me.
Yeah, so what we know about him is he's a famous baritone at the time, like a soloist. And Guruji, like he lives in New York, and Guruji has become friendly with him, and his house was the scene of Guruji meeting a lot of famous people as well. Like he was also a socialite in New York, apparently. And there is a few sections about him. Like so they have apparently grown close enough that even after Oscar Sanger passed away, the family invited him to their house in Mexico, right? So, and maybe Oscar Sanger dying brought them even closer, because apparently he also did like the funeral for Oscar Sanger, and so I guess that's how they grew really close. Yeah.
I saw an article from the New York Times that it was in 1929, and I didn't actually pay for it. You have to pay for it to access it, but I think it mentioned that Guruji was a student of Oscar's. So whether or not that's true, if anybody's listening, please get in touch and let us know if you have more detail on this. There was another potentially controversial thing that we read online. That was maybe a little bit confusing, but I want to actually include it in the context of this minute, because it does add potentially to some of the challenges that Guruji was facing at the time. But apparently after the funeral, and that was end of April, and Guruji left for Mexico on the 23rd of May, he had some issues with Oscar's wife and the daughter, who apparently saw Yogananda as overstaying his welcome in their home. And they said to him not to use the home anymore. But then oddly, yes, we see Yogananda in Mexico. So whether or not there's absolute truth in this, that I read in a blog somewhere online, but would love to know if somebody has more info on that, again, to try to confirm that. But really, when it rains, it pours. And I think, just to capitalize what's going on right now in this minute, Guruji was getting having difficulties from many sides, and he really was in dispute with himself as to, was he doing the right thing? And in the minute, we hear the narrator's voice depicting Yogananda, and it says, "Divine Mother, free me, let me go back to India to serve you there, not here. There's bitterness and heartache and frustration, and no one to listen to your message." And I thought that was so powerful, really, that Yogananda was so heartbroken, really, over all the events that were happening at the time, potentially seemingly losing some followers in Los Angeles, with Dhirananda taking them with him. He maybe thought, well, everything's gone to dust, it's reduced to ashes. Shall I simply return to India, where there's actually a desire for this message that I have for you? So it must have been a really, really tough time. And all these little events add up to what we see in the video, which was a very solemn looking Yogananda, and a very, soul searching moment for him. Mike, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so if we continue in Phil Goldberg's book, he also, I'm just gonna finish reading that paragraph. He says, like, with a heavy heart, I'm starting for Mexico, he wrote to Dr. Lewis on May 23rd. He was cutting loose from everything, he said, to consecrate himself to God. Disciples feared he might never return, and with good reason, it seems. Yogananda admitted there were times when he prayed to be relieved of his worldly duties. On one occasion, he said, he beseeched Divine Mother, free me, let me go back to India and serve you there. And so he was really, like you said, he was a bit fed up with everything, but also he knew that his mission wasn't finished yet, and he spent some time in Mexico, where he also met the Mexican president, Emilio Portes Gil. like you do when you're Yogananda, right? You go meet the president of the US, you meet the president of Mexico. And yeah, I feel like at the end of the day, the Mexico experience recharged him, gave him new strength. And then eventually, once he went back, he came back with new determination. Yeah, Ben?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that yearning for India, you know, his home, but also what India represents spiritually, kind of, you know, he talks about East and West a lot, and the sort of East being the inner almost, and the West being the outer. And I just equated that with the yearning that maybe we all have to go home. But then we have to live our lives. We have to live the drama, that kind of idea. We have to experience the drama of our lives as well. And there the great guru was, you know, and that makes him more accessible somehow. That he, you know, he has that same experience. You know, it's a little bit like, I mean, going back to my story about I had to go back home from India, from this wonderful experience, and then do it, and then do all the things I needed to do in order to kind of express my life, you know, and so both are happening kind of in tandem, that inner and the outer, the East and the West.
You know, in a very, very small way, I can relate to it with being in London, different country, very similar culture, but you're facing challenges there. It seems almost, you know, the easy way out to go back to Northern Ireland in some ways, back to family and maybe friends there. And I remember somebody telling me, you know, stay in London, you know, you have more to do here. And funny enough, within 6 months, I'd come onto the path of SRF and so on and so forth. But for Yogananda really to be saying this, I'll ask you guys a question. What do you think with Yogananda having, you know, done so much in the US by this point, 1929. So he had met many people. He knew that there was a desire for this word of God that he was spreading. For him to say this, do you think this is more of an emotional response? Because quite literally, he knows that there are many people that he has met himself that has supported him throughout the way in his journey until that time. To me, when I heard it, I thought, well, surely he knows. And maybe it's hindsight that benefits me with this, because we know that there's such a big following now in the US for SRF and around the world. But maybe it wasn't so clear at the time. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, Mike. What are your thoughts?
I think compared to India, the US was a much more hostile environment for him at this time. There were the amount of people that were actually looking for a spiritual message and were actually sincere seekers. I think they were much lower than in India. And also the active, how do you say, people who would actually work against him were also much higher. So I feel like to achieve much less, he had to work much harder in the US than in India, where he just opened the school and taught spirituality to children in Dihika and then in Ranchi, and he couldn't cope with the amount of children, right? That was his problem there. And then you go to the US and you give a few talks and they already call you all kinds of things, accuse you of things you never did, just because you are different. And there was, like we mentioned before, an element of racism in there, and obviously an element of a foreign culture. And I think obviously for him, also having grown up in India, it was much easier for him to fare there. And maybe it was also the karma, right? Like imagine you are this guru and you try to bring your message to the West. I mean, how much culture karma do you have to fight to get your message in there, right? And so this is like probably all those things we're seeing are like manifestations of that.
Ben, jump in.
Well, I'm just thinking about, it's quite a hard thing to compute rather. You know, there's the guru, there's the avatar, who's kind of all knowing, and you know, how does he not know? How, you know, how could he? I'm sure you probably talked about this with Dhirananda, for instance, before, but how, you know, if he probably knew on one level, on many levels, what was going to happen. But it's the same with the, you know, Christ and Judas. You know, this drama has to play out, and I don't think there's any point us trying to intellectually understand that a lot of the time, because it's like, this is high stuff, and the fact that both can be, you know, we're all souls, so maybe, you know, my consciousness is much lower, but maybe on one level I kind of know what the drama of my life needs to be and what I need to learn. But in order to play the drama, we have to forget it sometimes, or we have to not, you know, not see it, or not pay attention to it, or whatever it might be, in order to, because otherwise it's not a drama, is it?
Yeah, we've discussed this kind of topic before, haven't we? It's almost for our benefit in some ways, right? And I think it may be in some ways, although he said himself with a heavy heart, I'm starting from Mexico, that he wrote to Dr. Lewis. But look what came of it. You know, Mike, you mentioned there he met the president of Mexico, and how many people can do that? And I'm sure, I don't know, but may have been the first time that a Mexican president maybe had entertained a guest from India that was a spiritual teacher, and so on and so forth, possibly. And that's groundbreaking stuff, isn't it? We actually have a picture of that. Mike, do you want to share that? And we have a quote actually from His Excellency. Ben, can you see that in the chat? I just sent it to you. Maybe you would like to read that out as well when Mike gets up the picture.
Oh, it's just gone, just disappeared.
It should be in the chat form.
Can you guys see the picture?
Yes.
So I have the highest regard for him. I have kept up a heavy correspondence with Yogananda for many years, exchanging viewpoints on different subjects. His letters were of great inspiration and help to me. His death was a considerable loss for humanity. Emilio Portas Gil.
So this is obviously some time after he met with Yogananda, but that's a lovely picture there, Yogananda standing with His Excellency Emilio, former president of Mexico, and clearly thought very, very fondly of Yogananda, and they've apparently had some communication, which is heavy correspondence, as he put it, which is really great to see, isn't it? And Yogananda persisted with spreading this message that he had. You know, we now know, again with hindsight, what positive impacts that has had in Southern America. I'm in Brazil. I know it, and we've had guests on the show from Sao Paulo and so on, so forth. But this, I think, is a really great turning point for the spreading of the message in South America, in Latin America as well. So great to see that. So with strife comes great opportunity, really. So cool. We shall move on, unless you guys have anything else to add on Mexico, or you know, the challenges I had at the time. We can look at the second part of
That's
this.
One little thing I just wanted to mention, that when Guruji was in Mexico, he founded a meditation center in Mexico City, and that was one of the first ones. Like at this time, there were only centers in California. There was the one in London, and there was the one in Mexico City. And Phil Goldberg also mentioned that there was one in Ghana, interestingly, which I don't know much about. If anybody knows about the meditation center in Ghana, then please let us know about that, because that sounds super interesting.
Yeah,
Well, I've met quite a few Ghanaian devotees over the years. Connection there. Yeah.
Nice.
Nice. So we actually know he left on May 23rd, and I think it was a 3-month trip, but I have it in the back of my mind somewhere we've read 2 months, so maybe we can get confirmation on that. I think it was 3 months. And he, on the 15th of July, was in Mexico City with the president at that time. So probably around that time, then he did, as you say, Mike, founded center there. So that's awesome. We move on then to the second part of the minute, which is a pretty exciting thing. I'm glad to say. The second part of the minute we mentioned, we see Brother Vishwananda, and he's on a pilgrimage in India, and we see him in a train looking out quite longingly out, looking, let's say, towards the mountains. And the next thing we see him with 3 other people who are climbing a mountainside, and they're heading to Babaji's cave, which is very exciting stuff. But first, I wanted to say, we've talked about Brother Vishwananda in other minutes, so if anybody's interested, please do check out the other minutes on Brother Vishwananda. I believe it was very early on in the documentary series. But who do we know who the people are that he's with? I think we've identified one of the people. Who can say who that is, Mike?
Yeah, so the other Swami that walks with him is Swami Dhirananda, and the last time I met him, he was in Dwarahat. I think Ben also confirmed that. He's a monk there. I'm not sure if he's somewhere else now, but he has been a long-term Swami at YSS.
Nice. So he's with 2 other gents. If anybody knows who they are, let us know, because we'd be keen to find out. But they're on a pilgrimage to Babaji's cave, and they're trekking up this side of the mountain. It looks pretty amazing by all accounts, and having joined the path of yoga not so long ago, but in my late 20s, I haven't actually done many pilgrimages or any real legit pilgrimages. On this subject, who can tell us about pilgrimages that they've done? Mike or Ben, do you want to jump in? Mike, I'll come to you first.
Sure. Okay. I just wanted to talk about my pilgrimage to Babaji's cave that I did, because it was very special. Like when I went there, there's an ashram that YSS has. It's called Dwarahat. It's a little town called Dwarahat, and you drive up the mountains. I think it takes like 2 hours or something to drive like a windy mountain road up, and then when you stay there, it's like in the middle of the forest, and they have like a mandir there where you can meditate, and a beautiful little garden, and of course they would always serve you some amazing Indian meal. And then from there, I think it's like by car another 20 minutes, you go to a place called Kukuchina, and from there you walk to Babaji's cave, and it's like a walk through the jungle there, and then eventually you arrive at the cave, and the cave is like, I think they can even lock it now, so they open it up for you, and you can sit inside, and you can take some meditation pillows and meditate there. And it's just so special, because obviously that was like my first time in India, and everything was so new, and I really felt that like Babaji was watching us, and he was like welcoming us to come there. And I would love to do it again one day.
I've read online, if I can jump in, that it's meant to be the best place to be able to meditate on the planet. Mike, can you confirm? Can you just confirm?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. Ben, do you have any pilgrimage stories to share?
Interestingly, despite the fact I read autobiography in India, I haven't been back since. So that's on my bucket list I know a lot. I've heard so many stories about going to Babaji's cave, but I've never actually been there. But I've been to masters' places in America quite a few times. And it's very special. I mean, the first trip to Mother Center, when you go up the hill in the coach, I just thought halfway up the hill, I was in tears. And you reach the top and you've got all the brahmacharinis and with their boxes of Kleenex, just because they know that you're people in the coach are going to be weeping. And then when you see Master's shoes, you go to his bedroom and you see his shoes, and he had such small feet, you know, just peeking out to the edge of the bed. And it's beautiful. And it's very, you know, you really get in touch in a very deep way with Master there. Although I would like to say, I mean, maybe this is kind of coming out with, you know, the whole lockdown thing we've been going through the last couple of years, that, you know, you don't have to go on a pilgrimage. You don't have to go to these places to connect with Master. You know, you connect with him in your room. You know, he's there. He's always there. But somehow going on pilgrimage, it just does make it easier. On one level, doesn't, because you're just so connected with the, I don't know, the vibrations and the story that, you know, he was there. It's a very powerful thing. So it's a great thing to do, but I don't think it's something you have to do, you know, to get to you know.
Yeah, it's an interesting point actually that you make there. And I'm thinking pilgrimages it's something that is cross or trans religion, isn't it? This isn't something pilgrimages only exist in some, you know, one culture or another. It's something that everybody really wants to revere, is to remember those great individuals that came in the past. And so I think when you're attuning yourself with that and going on the pilgrimage, you're really you're attuning your mind really powerfully, like, for that purpose. So it's bound to have that amplification effect, I think, regardless, you know, of whether you're there or not. Would you be able to go into meditation and commune with Guruji and Babaji and so on and so forth as well? So yeah, amazing. Mike.
Yeah, it's interesting what Ben said, because it reminds me of when Sri Dayamata went to India. And of course, one of her themes for going to India when she went in 1963 was actually to go to Babaji's cave and pay homage to the great avatar. And like the day that I think it was the night before or the night after that she went to the cave, she meditated, and then she heard Babaji's voice. And I can read out what she said, that he told her. He said to her, "My child, know this. It is not necessary for devotees to come to this spot to find me. Whoever goes within with deep devotion, calling and believing in me, will find my response." And she then goes on that this is the message that she wants to is meant for us all. Like what Ben said, we don't have to go there, but of course when you're there, you get immersed in this vibration and it becomes easier.
Ben, do you have a comment to follow up on that?
Well, yeah, and my experience has been, I've been very lucky that when Masters wanted to get me there, he's got me there. And maybe some of it's also about attachment. You know, if I become too attached to going on pilgrimage, I don't get there. That's been my experience. I'm not saying that's everybody's, but it's kind of always, when I've managed to go there, it's always been this wonderful treat. And it's like Master kind of going, my child, you know, and then at times it's like, okay, you've got to do the work now, or, you know, it's not, you know, it's that inner journey. It's holding on to me, even if you're not in my places, or even if you're not. Been going back to lockdown, you know, we haven't been able to go to the London Centre, which has always been a special place for me, you know, recently, physically. And then you still walk the path, you still connect in the best way that you know how. So it's not about where you go, but it's very helpful. And then, I don't know, the Guruji gives you a treat. Guru gives you a treat sometimes, and kind of like that. That's been my experience of it anyway.
Yeah. And just to add on that, you reminded me, I think, in a part of the autobiography of a yogi, where Yogananda is trying desperately to escape to the Himalayas, and he just wants to go and meditate, right? But he's essentially pulled back in. He's pulled back in. You know, no, it's not your time. It's not your time. And it reminds me of this. And somewhere else I've heard, you know, if you want to go and spend a lifetime meditating in the Himalayas, you've got to accrue so much good karma that it's just, you know, unbearable to think about. But it's just a time and a place for pilgrimages, yeah, we're all left to decide when that is. But Guruji is definitely guiding us on that. Ben, did you have anything else to add?
Your guru, Sri Yukteswar told him, didn't they?
Yeah.
Mountains cannot be your guru. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Ben, maybe just on this subject, there's a little bit that we can read out about Babaji's cave. Would you be kind enough to read that part out, please?
So yeah, Mahavatar Babaji was first mentioned by Paramahansa Yogananda in his book Autobiography of a Yogi. Mahavatar Babaji in 1861 met Lahiri Mahashaya, who was posted to Raniket in his work as an accountant for the British government. One day, while walking in the hills of Dhanagiri, above Raniket, he heard a voice calling his name. Following the voice up the mountain, he met a tall, divinely radiant sadhu. He was amazed to find that the sadhu knew his name. This sadhu was Mahavatar Babaji. Mahavatar Babaji told Lahiri Mahashaya that he was his guru from the past, then initiated him into Kriya Yoga and instructed Lahiri to initiate others. Lahiri wanted to remain with Mahavatar Babaji, who told him instead that he must return to the world to teach Kriya Yoga, and that Kriya Yoga sadhana would spread through the people of the world through his presence in the world. Babaji's cave in Kukachina is the spot where he gave Kriya initiation to Lahiri Mahashaya.
Amazing. Thanks. Even just hearing you read this, it kind of fills me with like a, you know, such inspiration, I think is maybe the right word. Just and gratefulness and, you know, gratitude. Just really, it's really awesome to hear that and remind us really what significance that cave has to many of us on this path. It was one of the most moving parts of the autobiography of a yogi for me, was Lahiri Mahashaya's journey to go there and experience things that he experienced whilst with Babaji. And so, yeah, great, just a great reminder. And if anybody just on the nuts and bolts side is wanting to do this pilgrimage, it is a 25-kilometer, 2-hour distance from Dwarahat, and it's a 5-hour exploration time. It's free, yeah. So these things are really accessible to anybody and everybody. It's definitely on my bucket list to do as far as pilgrimages go. And my wife is very keen to do it with me. So yeah, Ben, did you have anything else to add?
I was just wanting to echo what you said. I mean, going back to me reading the autobiography in India, the two passages that hit me the most that I remember are him meeting Mahavatar Babaji and that scene where he meets his guru, Sri Yukteswar. And my experience of that is almost as though I was there. I can't describe it anymore, that it wasn't just reading a passage in a book. It was kind of like, that's real. That's kind of, and I never doubted, the story about Babaji, because if you just read it as a kind of like, it's almost like a fairy story, isn't it? but it's just the I don't know, it just went very deep for me when I first encountered that story.
Yeah, same, absolutely same. Mike?
It was funny, like continuing what Ben just said, like if you think Lahiri Mahashaya, he was like stationed there, right, in the middle of nowhere for a railroad company, and or was it railroad? No, or maybe it was something else actually. I don't actually remember. But anyways, like, and he was stationed there by mistake, right? So once he had met Babaji, they were like, oh yeah, we made a mistake. You actually go back to where you were. And then just wandering through this jungle, because there's something is calling you. I find that such a like Ben just said, like a fairy tale, right? You go there and suddenly the Swami appears to you, and he's young, and he says, "Don't you remember me?" And that was one of my favorite parts of the autobiography of a yogi when I read it the first time.
And the script, I should say, really importantly, coming back to what we mentioned earlier in the episode, Brother Vishwananda is speaking in this minute, and he says, in Yogananda's darkest hours, there's only one place that he went. He always went within. We call it God, place of stillness. And so the minute takes us from this really chaotic time, you know, with this sorrowful music and the heartbreak of the moment. And then the music drops and we hear stillness and silence. And Brother Vishwananda talking, we go into Babaji's cave, stillness, silence. It's a beautiful transition. And they've captured it very well, I think. What was probably the reality for Guruji at the time: chaos outside, stillness within, and quiet within. So I thought that was a great way that they did that part of the minute. So that really wraps up this minute. So as far as we've covered some of the transitions, Guruji's moment in Mexico, parts included there, and the pilgrimage. Ben, do you have anything else to add?
I just wanted to sort of like just about the cave, Babaji's cave, and the cave of silence. And one of his chants, one of my favorites of his chants, is "Come into my secret cave, mother, into my cave of silence." You know that. So that just sort of encapsulates the. And how often have we been going through things, and we either go to a group meditation or we go within, and it's you know, you get to a stage where you can't do it without doing that. You can't do the rest of it without doing that. That's,
yeah. And in the Bible, be still and know that I'm God. Right. It's one of my favorite lines. It's awesome. So yeah, good job by the directors. So really, Mike, do you have anything else to add? All good for this minute? Wrapped up?
Yeah, I think we've done a good job covering the minutes.
So next time, in the next minute, we'll look at what the answer was that Paramahansa Yogananda received from God in relation to whether he should remain in the US or go to India. And we'll look at his reaction to it as well. So please join us there for more. Thank you for joining. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.